Ma'am, for the third time, we genuinely don't understand what you're saying. The receptionist's voice was taut, his anxious eyes flicking toward the small crowd gathering by the counter. In sharp contrast to the confusion, Naomi Takahara, the Japanese woman in a tailored sapphire coat, stood motionless, her hands folded neatly before her. Behind her, her assistant fumbled frantically with his phone, his flushed face betraying his panic. "What do we do now?" one of the staff whispered behind the counter. "The system shows she booked the Imperial Suite, but she won't answer in English, French, or even Cantonese." The tension was suddenly pierced by the sharp rhythm of high heels on marble. Clarissa Vance, the renowned, razor-tongued manager of the Astoria Grand Hotel, was approaching. Would her arrival solve the problem or spark something worse? "Good morning," she greeted smoothly, placing both hands on the polished counter. "I'm the general manager. How can we help you, ma'am?" The Japanese woman bowed slightly and replied in her native tongue, her voice soft yet unwavering. Clarissa leaned closer, speaking slowly, almost patronizing. "This is America, ma'am. If you want service here, you need to speak English." A heavy silence fell across the lobby. No reply came. Clarissa turned on her staff, her practiced smile collapsing into visible irritation. "She's staging a spectacle," she muttered under her breath. "Completely unacceptable." Whispers rippled through the onlookers. From his vantage point, Daniel Hale observed the atmosphere sour, curdling into disdain. Clarissa signaled to a nearby security officer. "Write up a formal report of this incident." Naomi's assistant stepped forward, his voice desperate. "Please. She is one of Japan's most highly regarded executives. She's blocking service in a five-star establishment." Clarissa shot back. "We can't waste time on riddles and silence." Naomi's hand flickered with the slightest motion, then stilled. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was sharpened steel. Watching quietly, Daniel Hale set down his cleaning rag on the custodian's cart and approached. What he did next silenced the lobby. He performed a deep, formal bow, precise, reverent. Then he lifted his head, met Naomi Takahara's eyes, and spoke in fluent, graceful Japanese. "My sincerest apologies for the inconvenience, madam. How may I be of service?" For a heartbeat, Naomi's calm facade shifted. Warm surprise flickered in her gaze, melting the tension that had gripped the room. She answered softly in Japanese, her words flowing like water. Daniel listened, nodded, his understanding unmistakable. Turning to the stunned receptionist, Daniel spoke clearly. "Mrs. Takahara would like to check in. The Imperial Suite. Here is her passport." The clatter of the keyboard broke the silence. Moments later, the key card was issued. The storm had passed, but in the manager's office that night, no warmth lingered. The air was cold, punctuated by the sharp tap of a fountain pen on dark oak. Clarissa Vance didn't look at Daniel Hale. Her gaze was fixed somewhere far off. Her lips curled into a cruel smirk. "Mr. Hale," she began, her voice syrupy and venomous. "That little performance of yours today, unforgettable." She rose, her words edged with disdain. "But here's the issue: you crossed a line. Let me remind you of your actual station." She tossed a sheet across the desk. "Starting tomorrow, you'll be reassigned to the basement. Storage cleanup. And you'll be scrubbing the grease traps in the kitchen. That's the real duty of a custodian like you." Daniel's jaw tightened. Anger surged, but he smothered it. For Charlotte, his little girl, he needed this job. He lifted his head, locked eyes with Clarissa, and replied steadily, every word carrying the weight of sacrifice. "Understood, ma'am." Daniel turned, ready to leave that suffocating office. But just as his hand touched the brass knob, the heavy oak door swung open without a knock. Mrs. Naomi Takahara stood in the doorway, poised and motionless. Her assistant lingered a step behind, his expression caught between confusion and alarm. She had come with the intent to thank the staff member who had helped her, but the sharp words inside had made her stop. She had heard everything. Clarissa's expression faltered, though she quickly tried to gather her mask again. Mrs. Takahara? Can I help you with something? Naomi didn't answer her. Her eyes swept past Clarissa's crumbling facade, landing firmly on Daniel. She inclined her head ever so slightly before speaking in English this time. Calm but edged like steel. Miss Vance, I couldn't help but overhear. Is it truly the policy of the Astoria Grand Hotel to punish an employee for showing kindness and professionalism toward a guest? A few staff passing in the corridor paused, drawn by the tension. The air thickened. No, of course not, ma'am, Clarissa stammered, her voice brittle. This is merely an internal matter of discipline. Internal discipline? Naomi's brow lifted, elegant and sharp. You deem cultural empathy as overstepping? You consider assisting a guest an act deserving punishment? Each question landed with precision, leaving Clarissa nowhere to retreat. Before the very guest she had dismissed, the manager seemed small, shriveled beneath the weight of her own arrogance. Naomi turned from her entirely, her gaze softening as it fell on Daniel. The frost in her eyes melted into genuine respect. Mr. Hale, is it? Daniel, caught off guard, managed only a small nod. Naomi's lips curved into a faint smile. I would like to hear your story. If you could spare me a moment? Perhaps in the tea lounge. It would be my honor, ma'am, Daniel answered quietly. And just like that, the balance of power shifted. The most influential woman in the hotel walked side by side with the custodian, leaving the marble office behind for the quiet elegance of the lounge. Daniel sat stiffly, palms resting on his thighs, his gray custodian's uniform stark against the opulence surrounding him. Across from him, Naomi Takahara prepared the tea herself. She dismissed the hovering server with a subtle gesture, lifting the porcelain pot with both hands. With deliberate grace, she poured a golden stream into a waiting cup and slid it toward him. Please, she said in Japanese. Thank you, Daniel replied instinctively, also in Japanese. Naomi paused, a knowing smile touching her lips. You're Japanese. It's flawless, she remarked, genuine admiration in her tone. It carries the soul of Kyoto, the cadence, the honorifics, the rhythm. The words cut deeper than she realized. Memories he had buried stirred to life. He inclined his head slightly. Yes, ma'am. I once taught cultural linguistics at Kyoto University. A long time ago. I thought so, Naomi said softly, as though confirming a suspicion. Which makes me wonder all the more. Why would someone like you? Her words trailed, her gaze searching. Daniel held his silence, uncertain. She did not press. Instead, she waited with the patience of someone accustomed to listening. Then tell me, she asked gently, what is your story, Mr. Hale? Why would a former lecturer from Kyoto University accept this work and endure such treatment? Daniel drew in a slow breath, the bitterness of earlier still fresh on his tongue. But something in her presence invited honesty. I wasn't always a custodian, he began, voice low. When I first came here, I worked the reception desk. With my language skills, I excelled. Perhaps a little too well. His eyes lifted, shadowed by a faint, sad smile. Manager Vance disliked that. She resented how guests, especially those from Japan, sought me out. She saw it as undermining her authority. Eventually, she found a minor discrepancy in my paperwork and used it to demote me. She told me it was either janitorial duty or no job at all. With a young daughter depending on me, I had no choice. Naomi nodded, empathy flickering in her expression. She knew the type of person Clarissa was. But that was only the ending of the story, Daniel continued, his voice turning distant, haunted. The true reason I left Kyoto, the reason I am here at all, is because of my wife. He stopped there, the weight of her memory making it difficult to breathe. Her name was Yumi, Daniel said softly. We met in Kyoto. I was a young lecturer, full of ambition, and she was the spirit of that city itself. Yumi taught me that language wasn't just words. It was the depth of a bow, the silence between sentences, the art of understanding what's left unspoken. With her, I had a beautiful life, and we had a beautiful daughter, Charlotte. A genuine smile flickered across his face at the mention of his little girl. But then Yumi fell ill. So quickly, everything unraveled. After she passed, Daniel's voice faltered. Kyoto wasn't home anymore. Every street corner, every shrine, every spring blossom, it all became unbearable. The lectures I once loved felt hollow. I stood before students, but my spirit had died with her. He lowered his eyes to his calloused hands, no longer a scholar's but a laborer's. I looked at Charlotte and saw Yumi in her. I realized I couldn't be the father she needed if I stayed drowning in that grief. So, I gave it up. I left my professorship, left Kyoto, and came back here with one purpose: to give my daughter everything I could. He drew a steady breath. This custodial job, humbling as it is, gives me something academia never could. Time. I can walk Charlotte to school in the morning, bring her home in the afternoon. I can be there when she's unwell. I traded my career for presence in her life, and that's a choice I've never regretted. The tea lounge was silent. His words love, loss, sacrifice hung in the air. Naomi set the teapot down gently and looked at him. A sigh escaped her lips. Then, unexpectedly, her expression shifted into a playful smile. Switching into hesitant English, she said, halting and imperfect, "Actually, my English, not very good." Daniel's head snapped up, astonishment written on his face. Her smile deepened at his reaction before she returned to flawless Japanese, her tone lighter now, almost relieved. "The truth is, I want to speak English," she admitted. "But my proficiency is basic. True communication in it is exhausting." She leaned back slightly, her eyes sharpening with intent. "And because of that, I turned it into a test." Daniel froze. The scene at the reception desk suddenly reassembled in his mind from a different angle. "Yes," Naomi confirmed, as if reading him. "Speaking only Japanese isn't just clinging to tradition. In a world where English is treated as the language of authority, where everyone expects others to bend toward them, I wanted the opposite." Her gaze locked on his, steady and commanding. "I wanted to see who would take a step toward me, who had the empathy, the patience, the kindness, who would see not an inconvenience, but a person. And today, Mr. Hale, you were the only one who passed that test." This time, her smile carried more than gratitude. It was kinship, the recognition of something rare. The conversation ended there, but its echo lingered. Naomi rose, leaving the lounge as quietly as she had entered the hotel. No demands, no confrontation. Clarissa Vance, relieved, told herself it had passed. At worst, a minor complaint in the file. She could not have been more wrong. 2 weeks later, news rattled the entire hospitality industry. The Astoria Grand Hotel Group had a new investor. A controlling block of shares had been purchased by Takahara Technologies, and its CEO, Mrs. Naomi Takahara, would be joining the board of directors. Clarissa nearly dropped the newspaper as she read, her fingers trembling. The very woman she had dismissed like a nuisance in her own lobby was now among the most powerful voices in the corporation, the kind of voice that could decide her future with a word. At the first board meeting Naomi attended, held in the Astoria's most opulent conference room, Clarissa Vance was required to present as branch manager. Her heart pounded as she entered, doing everything to avoid Naomi's gaze. Yet there she was, seated beside the chairman, poised and commanding. The reports droned on until finally the chairman turned toward her. "Mrs. Takahara, as our newest board member and with your expertise in customer experience, do you have any observations on our current operations?" This was the moment Clarissa Vance had feared above all. Mrs. Naomi Takahara smiled politely, but her eyes were razor-sharp as they fixed on Clarissa. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I do have a few remarks, drawn from a recent personal experience right here in this very hotel. She began to recount what had happened in the lobby 2 weeks earlier. She mentioned no names, simply laying out the events. A guest unable to speak English, a manager who responded with impatience and disdain, and a custodian who resolved the situation with kindness and empathy. The problem was not a language barrier, Naomi Takahara declared, her voice carrying across the boardroom. The problem was a barrier of service culture. We are operating an international hotel chain, and yet we punish employees who possess cross-cultural skills, while promoting managers who wield authority instead of empathy. Miss Vance, she said suddenly, addressing Clarissa directly, making her start. Do you truly believe that banishing a talented employee to scrub kitchen floors simply because he outperformed you constitutes an effective management strategy? A heavy silence fell. Every gaze turned toward Clarissa, whose face had drained of color. She sat frozen, unable to speak. This incident exposes a critical flaw in our system, Naomi continued, turning back to the board. We don't merely need managers who can balance numbers, we need leaders who can understand people. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. Therefore, I propose the creation of a new role. Vice President of Service Quality and Guest Culture. This office will oversee the retraining of our entire staff, establish new standards for cross-cultural communication, and ensure that every guest is treated with the utmost respect regardless of where they come from or what language they speak. The chairman nodded vigorously, thoroughly convinced. A brilliant idea. And do you already have a candidate in mind for such a pivotal role, Mrs. Takahara? Her lips curved into a smile of absolute triumph. Yes, that person is Mr. Daniel Hale. Oh, the name detonated like a bombshell in the room. He not only holds an outstanding academic background in cultural linguistics from a renowned university, she said, but far more importantly, he has demonstrated integrity, compassion, and crisis management skills even from the lowest rung of this institution. He is the one who best understands what must change. The decision was passed swiftly. Daniel's appointment took effect immediately. Not only was he restored to dignity, but he was also entrusted with the authority to reshape the entire culture of the hotel. When the meeting finally broke up and the board members filed out, only the chairman, Mrs. Takahara, and a shell-shocked Clarissa remained. That was masterful, Mrs. Takahara, the chairman murmured. She merely inclined her head, her gaze never wavering from Clarissa. I had no intention of firing her, she said coldly. That would have been far too easy. She rose and crossed the room with measured steps, stopping before Clarissa, who stood rooted in place. Miss Vance, Mrs. Takahara began, her voice like ice. You are not being terminated. Clarissa's head jerked up, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Instead, Mrs. Takahara continued, you will remain here and report directly to the new Vice President, Mr. Daniel Hale. She let the words hang in the air, sharp and final. Every day, you will learn from him how to treat a guest. You will follow the very policies he designs. And you will have to watch the man you once dismissed rise above you, earning the respect of everyone in this hotel. She leaned closer, her words dropping to a whisper sharp enough to cut. That, Miss Vance, is the true punishment, but also your chance at redemption. Now, get to work, under your new boss. With that, Mrs. Takahara turned on her heel and strode out, leaving Clarissa frozen in the chill of the boardroom. 6 months later, the lobby of the Astoria Grand Hotel felt transformed. Not in its marble floors or chandeliers, but in its atmosphere. The heaviness was gone, replaced by a warmth and efficiency that pulsed through every interaction. At the reception desk, staff now wore sleek name tags. Beneath each name was a row of miniature flags representing the languages they could speak fluently. It was one of Daniel Hale's earliest reforms. Daniel, dressed sharply in a tailored suit instead of the gray custodian's uniform, moved with ease through the grand lobby. He didn't walk like an overseer, but like a gracious host welcoming guests into his home. He exchanged pleasantries in French with an elderly couple, then stopped to help a porter stack luggage more neatly. Staff greeted him with respect, never fear. "Good morning, Mr. Vice President," a young clerk said. Daniel smiled warmly. "Please, just Daniel." .com. His life had blossomed. He had moved into a larger apartment, its windows spilling with light, perfect for Charlotte's piano practice. His schedule was demanding, yes, but flexible enough that he never missed a school performance. For the first time in years, he could breathe freely. The glass doors of the hotel slid open, and Mrs. Naomi Takahara entered. Gone was the severe boardroom attire. Today, she wore a wisteria-colored silk dress and carried a small gift wrapped in washi paper. "Daniel-san," she called, her voice warm. "Takahara-san," he greeted, stepping forward with a smile. "You're early. I couldn't wait to try the lotus tea you told me about," she said, offering him the package. "And this for Charlotte. A Kokushi doll. I hope she'll treasure it." "She will," Daniel replied softly. "Thank you." They were no longer investor and employee. They were friends. Mrs. Takahara visited often now, not to oversee, but to share tea and listen stories of change at the hotel, of Charlotte's small triumphs. As they turned toward the tea lounge, a German family entered the lobby, weary from travel, struggling with halting English. The receptionist, calm and collected, asked them to wait a moment. Daniel instinctively prepared to step forward until he noticed something else. Clarissa, who had been quietly supervising nearby, was already moving. Her face held no irritation now, only focus. She didn't flounder with broken phrases, but instead addressed a colleague whose name tag bore a German flag. "Mark, could you assist these guests, please?" Mark bowed politely and engaged the family in fluent German. Their fatigue melted into relief and gratitude. Clarissa lingered only long enough to be sure everything was handled, then stepped back without fanfare. Naomi Takahara watched silently. She didn't just see Daniel anymore. She saw a system working. Clarissa, no longer scornful but professional, applying the framework Daniel had built. A young staff member confidently bridging cultures. And Daniel himself not just a mediator now, but the architect of an entire culture of empathy. The guests' gratitude, Clarissa's quiet precision, and Daniel's contented glance, it was all fruit from the seed she had planted. Naomi Takahara smiled, certain of what she had always believed. The most important language, in the end, is always spoken from the heart.